Hi, I'm August Keller, and this is my review of Captain America, the First Avenger. So, I would call this movie mixed. Its first half is very restrained and sets up the protagonist very well. He's got relatable motivations that are very clear, and that makes him sympathetic. But the story besides that, I would say, is disappointing. There's underdeveloped romance and underdeveloped tragedy, and internally the hero I find to be a bit of a Mary Sue, honestly. Externally, at the beginning, he's a small guy, so he has an external weakness, but internally he seems very, very. There's not a lot of room for him to grow, so his arc is pretty flat. He doesn't really learn anything too much. He's a born hero, it seems like. And this is especially noticeable when he transforms, when he turns from a small guy to a big, strong man. There's no like internal or external struggle for him to come to terms with that. It's a metamorphosis. For most people, I think if they were to suddenly have a brand new body, even if it is the body they always dreamed of, there would be some kind of it would take some time to get used to, and might even be a struggle emotionally. But there really is no time spent on that. And then also the second half of the script is really just a collection of tropes. There's a lot of cliches and contrivances. The stakes are very impersonal. Like the villain and the hero don't really have much screen time together until their final confrontation. There are some excessive characters. A lot of they could have cut a lot of that sidekick group, and really spent more time on Bucky. It's very predictable, and I found the dialogue to be very corny. And I also found the politics to be a bit trivialized and simplistic. It would have been nice to dig into those a little bit more instead of making it so black and white. The acting establishes personalities. That's Chris Evans does a good job being what we all think of when we think of Captain America. But I found the chemistry between him and his female lead to be very vanilla, and there's also a lack of vulnerability. There are some scenes that are supposed to be sad, and I'm not saying it's his fault. Maybe it was the direction or the producers behind it, but he doesn't really go very vulnerable. So, all that is to say that I think Captain America's potential is pretty weighed down by a lot of superficial formulas. Technically, I think Captain America is also very muddled. It has very mild tones, like I was saying, and the set pieces are very mediocre. So that's kind of what I think of when I think of the direction here. It's just forgettable, frankly. The cinematography is mostly basic and often even drab. A lot of grays and blacks, and just not a lot of color, not a lot of pop. And the framing is also very just standard. Despite plentiful action, and there is an engaging montage, but besides that, the editing really struggles to maintain momentum, and I think a lot of that has to do with an uneven structure. The second act really kind of feels out of sorts. There's kind of too many montages, and we don't really feel his journey. It feels kind of like clunky. There's a variety of genre elements that help the sound design, be proactive. I also, I don't normally like the MCU's music choices, but I think this one is one of the better ones. I found it very retro and optimistic, which matches, Captain America's ideals, and also kind of gives the movie a sense of personality, which is, I think, the only aspect technically that really does that. The production design really struggles to balance aesthetics. I feel like, it often looks overly clean and often very generic. It's trying to be in the past, but have some retrofuturism. But I just kind of noticed like a lot of the locations, especially in the second half, were very just could have been in any movie. Any movie. I think Chris Evans' superb fit really secures the cast. I think everyone around, there's some fame. Hugo Weaving, people like. I like him. Tommy Lee Jones, but I wouldn't call that a ton of star power around him. Actually, probably Sebastian Stan ended up being the biggest supporting name next to Evans now. But he isn't in it very much. I think the special effects are pretty torn. I think the compositing of Evans's face on the small body, I think, is convincing most of the time, but also very uncanny. Even when it is working, if I feel uncomfortable about it, which, I don't know how else to go about that, but I do think it's a bit of a distraction while also working. So I don't really know how I feel about that. But on the other side, I do think there's just too much CGI, especially in the second half of the movie. I think it really undermines some of the scenes. It just feels very weightless. So I find the special effects to be inconsistent. There's good moments too, but yeah. So overall, I think Captain America is middling. It's just I'm not mad at it. I thought it was a fine movie, but it's definitely not something I would say is actively good, and not something that I would recommend to people to go out of their way to watch. There are many other superhero movies to choose from. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. If you like what I'm doing here, please feel free to like and subscribe. I also have an Instagram linked in the description, which I would love support there as well. But at the very least, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.